Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our sharing session. It's wonderful tonight to have um, one of our students presenting for us, and particularly a student who's finished basic training in logotherapy. And I'm sorry there aren't more people here because it's something that I'd like to encourage, that these sessions are not only for people who have years of experience with logotherapy, or who are trainers, or who are uh, professional practitioners or anything. We would like everybody to share their stories. Anybody who is connected with the Institute in any way, even, from the optimal living upwards, if people have something that they'd like to share with us, would be wonderful. So, Helen, thank you so much for being the first in quite a while of our students to present for us. And I think what's so important is that you're going to be sharing your personal story with us, which is always wonderful, meaningful, and always gives us plenty of food for thought. So thank you, Helen, and over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark, and a very good evening to everyone. My name's Helen Viljoen, and tonight I've been asked to share on finding your calling in life. And I was just sharing with Mark that I felt quite a vulnerability around the topic because I felt that maybe I didn't have a big, sort of amazing story to tell. And he really reassured me in terms of saying, well, actually, logotherapy is about finding meaning in the moments that have occurred in your life. And that was a real encouragement. So, my hope for you is that that's what the learning is, to find the meaning in my moments of reflection that led me to my own calling. So, I thought it would be an apt opportunity to start with a really beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl that is on your screen. So everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life. Everyone must carry out a concrete assignment that demands fulfillment. Therein, he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is unique, as is his specific opportunity to implement it. And I really thought that this quote had specific relevance for tonight because it highlights some key principles and a very simple truth. And that is, we first and foremost are unique beings, and we've been given one life. And we have a mission or a specific calling in our life that only we can fulfill in our uniqueness. And secondly, our lives can never be repeated. As Frankl states, the time between birth and death is limited, and we are to use the passing time and to use it well. So logotherapy teaches us that our calling or our mandate is to live life to the fullest. As Frankl so perfectly stated, that only time well used is time saved forever. So tonight I'm going to share my journey in finding my calling, and I hope that it will add some value to yourselves as practicing logotherapists, or to support your clients who are struggling with finding their calling. But the disclaimer is that it's my unique lived experience, and it's one perspective. It's not the gospel. And I'm also a Christian, and I've been guided by my faith in finding my calling. I feel that I have to tell my story as I've experienced it with my truth and my perspective. But of course, I grant you the right, grant you that same right of interpretation for yourself. So, what is a calling? Well, I love this. Meets the world's deep need. It's what the world needs. And Frankl describes it as a restlessness of the heart. Now, for me, this is really compelling because can everybody hear me? Still okay? Just checking in. This is really compelling because the heart is restless essentially until it has found realized meaning. And often you may hear your clients or your friends around you saying, I have a niggle. I don't quite feel at peace, as if there's something missing from my life. And that's that beautiful restlessness of the heart that Frankl described. I think it's also bigger than you. So it should transcend you. It's something that we strive for, something beyond ourselves, to give back in a way that really honors the beautiful life that we've been given on this earth. I think that it evokes a sense of joyful conviction. And I don't know about you, but if you have seen somebody talk about the work that they do, their eyes glisten, their body language changes, they take on a different stance, they almost have a conviction and an alignment with themselves and the work that they do. And it inevitably brings them quite a lot of joy. So for me, it should evoke a joyful conviction. And it's also about responsibility. In other words, we have the ability to respond. So Frankl really captured this beautifully when he said that um, each man can only answer to life by answering to his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. And Winston Churchill also said that the price of greatness is responsibility. And so I think there's an element of responsibility in our calling, that we are to use what we have. And I also believe that there should be congruence between your own personal values, your strengths, your natural strengths, and your beliefs, your natural talents. And when there is congruence, then there's that joyful conviction that I spoke of earlier. And often your calling is not singular. It has multiple facets to it. So it often involves using your multiple skills, your gifts, and your experience that all culminates in you really being sure that, your calling is right. You create your calling, and I think you do that through connection, through relationships, through interactions with others. Um, as logotherapy guides us, your creative, experiential, and attitudinal values. So you really deliberately create your own calling. And just like we can't escape our conscience, we cannot escape answering to our calling. And I often use the expression, what we resist persists. It stays with you. It's that voice sitting on your shoulder that says, there's something more for you. So there's a beautiful lived example in Frankl, in his own experience of finding meaning. And this was when he entered Auschwitz, and he had a manuscript containing his life work in his jacket. And then the jacket was taken away from him, and he was forced to put on the clothes of an inmate who had already been sent to the gas chambers. And in the pocket of the dead man's jacket was the prayer, the Shema Israel prayer. And so the quote is from his book: instead of the many pages of my manuscript, I found in a pocket of the newly acquired coat one single page torn out of a Hebrew prayer book containing the most important Jewish prayer, the Shema Israel. How should I have interpreted such a coincidence other than a challenge to live my thoughts instead of merely putting them on paper? And I really believe that in that moment of meaning, he felt called to be a living example of the work that he had written about. And I think that this is true for all of us. We have these moments where it's so strong. It's such an undeniable, and that's why he wrote coincidence in apostrophes. How is this a coincidence for me other than a very strong message and calling on my life? The second one was freedom to find meaning. So we have freedom. How beautiful is that? The last of the human freedoms. We can choose our own way. And this is something so magical when we realize that we have the freedom to choose what we wish to do with our life. In fact, I think one of Frankl's students said to him that the meaning of his life was to give meaning to the lives of others, which was a really powerful moment. And then, of course, responsibility to find our meaning as well. And so logotherapy teaches us that when we explore finding our calling, your life has meaning, we have freedom to find meaning, and we have a responsibility to find that meaning as well. And Frankl gave us a beautiful example of how he experienced it. So how did I begin to discover my calling against that backdrop? I reflected and asked myself, well, what am I naturally good at? What brings me joy in life? What makes life worth living? What is aligned with my conscience, my values, my beliefs? What has been powerfully spoken over and into my life often and more than once? What have people told me? What have they said about me? How did they experience me? And how has my past prepared me to respond to my calling? What will make the world a better place? The joyful conviction that I spoke of earlier. But when I reflected, on my own path to find my calling, there were several things that specifically influenced my journey. And the first thing was my parents and my nurturing. So I was born on the 27th of February in Durban, South Africa, and I'm the youngest in my family, and the only girl. So I have three older brothers. One is late. I had a generally very happy childhood, and very good memories of being young and carefree and free-spirited. I grew up in a home filled with lots of love, lots of joking around and laughter, but I always had a very strong sense that I needed to work hard and achieve something significant with my life. I was a natural pleaser. I'm a type 2 Enneagram, the considerate helper. So I was always seeking love and affirmation and confirmation or acceptance through achieving things in my life and through pleasing others. If I pleased others, then I thought I would be accepted and loved. My mum was a nurse and my dad an engineer. And I really think I got my business acumen and the value of hard work and loyalty, conscientiousness from my father. But my mum, being a nurse, taught me to leave a legacy of love and really how to show compassion and care to others and about forgiveness, about empathy. And I think that I really owe my love for people and my servant heart to my mom. So to her, I am eternally grateful. So my parents and my nurturing were a very strong anchor in my life. The second thing was feedback from others. So words that created worlds for me. And one example that I could think of is when I was in grade 7, or in my day it was called standard 5, my geography teacher said to me, "So Helen, will you become head girl at your high school?" And because I had been head girl of my senior primary school. And I hadn't thought about my future at all. I hadn't thought about that until that moment. But his words stuck with me. And I really believe they became a fuel that inspired my thoughts towards achieving that goal. And I did become the head girl of my high school. And when I stood on that stage and received my honors badge, his words came back to me like a flood. It was so clear. And it was then I realized the immense power of words spoken into and over someone's life. They can either empower you, they can enrich you and build you up, or they can really destroy you as a person. And so words or feedback would really influence my calling, because I really at that point started to really pay attention to what people were saying to me, the feedback that I got throughout my career. My natural talents and beliefs. So I studied industrial psychology and I entered the business world working for a very large global firm. I left Durban and my home and everything that was familiar. And I did a lot of organizational development work, culture, leadership, and training. And I think my love for people and for connection with people and wanting to see people grow and thrive was a real influence in my journey. And I loved coaching. I absolutely loved coaching people, and sitting with managers and listening to their stories very deeply. I found a great sense of joy and fulfillment in doing that. The fourth thing that influenced my journey was illness, which also gave me time to reflect. So I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a moment. But that was really my meaning moment. And the fifth one was opportunity. So timing and opportunity had to be right. And I think the circumstances had to be right. in my life at that time too. So my lived experience, some of the life events that shaped my calling. And I thought, well, they all happened in Johannesburg, so let me draw the Joburg skyline for everybody, just to create a bit of fun this evening. So I think one of the first moments that shaped my calling came at the age of 33. I had been working exceptionally hard, very long hours, and I pushed myself to achieve results. There was the pleaser in me coming up, the sense of obligation to achieve something significant with my life. And at the age of 33, I was promoted to executive lead. And at that point, I felt I'd achieved my almost corporate goal of senior leadership in a corporate, and sort of could put the tick next to that. But I still felt incredibly empty and restless, the restlessness of the heart. Something was missing. And I also felt so stifled and weighed down by the demands and the stresses of corporate life. Um, and there was a voice inside that was calling me towards something else, something that was more authentically aligned to me. But I was so fearful of giving up everything that was so familiar to me. And I think that had served me really well in my life up until that point. And then I was assigned to two major projects at the same time. And again, working incredibly long, taxing hours with very difficult clients and complex work. And towards the end of that year, I fell really ill with flu and what my GP defined as adrenal burnout. And she simply said to me that this happened because I was not resting, not looking after myself. I was in fight and flight mode. And I was really man down for about a month, which was huge. I mean, can you imagine? You're working on a project, you're leading certain teams, and suddenly you're not there. And of course, the guilt that came with that. But during that time, I really had, sorry, pause for a moment. Um, During that time, I realized that I was losing joy. I really, really was losing the joy in my life. I didn't have any work-life balance. And that recurring theme of pressure to succeed and to say yes to everybody, taking on work that I didn't need to, trying to prove myself, was a real moment of truth. And I had a desire to really be seen as a capable leader. You know, Helen can do it. She's a capable pair of hands. Get her to do it. But this was in the extreme, really to my detriment. And I felt in that moment that if I had carried on working at the pace that I had, I probably would have fallen over at the age of 35. Who knows? So at that point, I had made some conscious choices, and with the help of a coach and a close friend, I started to put boundaries in my life and really caring for myself more, the normal things, eating well, sleeping well. I was sleeping a lot more than I was, and slowly felt more of Helen start to come back. But I still felt that there was something missing. I wasn't quite aligned in my life. And then I got married at 35. And that moment gave me an opportunity to reflect on my purpose. Um, and what I decided to do, took a leap of faith. I left the corporate world at that point, and I contracted back to the same company for about 2 years after that. But I used the time to think more deeply about my calling. So, what is it that I need more to change in my life? And what gives me real joy? Because the contracting work, even though I had less sales pressure, I was certainly not happy. So, what have I been naturally good at? Because my stress levels pretty much stayed the same. So if I didn't get the message then, I certainly got the message in 2017. Um, and I almost coined that the year of illness, because in the March of that year, I developed shingles. First time I'd had it, and it really affected me quite badly. I was left with almost debilitating fatigue. Um, and I really battled to recover the entire year. And then around about October, I discovered a lump in my left shoulder. And at first, they mistakenly diagnosed me after doing scans with an aggressive sarcoma, which is essentially cancer. And I remember when they gave me the news in that moment, sitting in the doctor's hospital, they'd called the hospital counselor to come and sit with me to almost help me process this life-changing news. Um, I felt as if my world had stopped. And my first thought was, have I done enough with my life? And my answer was absolutely not. There was still something that was yet to be done. So I underwent a biopsy to make sure that the radiologist's report was correct. I had to wait about a week and a half to get the news back. But fortunately, the biopsy revealed something else. So I was then correctly diagnosed with an extra abdominal aggressive desmoid tumor. Now, it's probably one of the most rarest tumors. I think 1 in 1 million people develop these tumors. And I then had quite a complicated surgery to remove the tumor because it had embedded itself into my muscle. And I spent 2 weeks in the Donny Gordon Hospital in Johannesburg. And in hindsight, when reflecting on it, I really feel that this was my time of my deepest reflection in my life, where I needed to really focus on my health and care for myself. There was nothing else I could do. And I wondered to myself, well, where did this very rare tumor come from? Was stress the main factor that had caused it? And I felt deeply that it really was. I wasn't really living. I was just living from one deadline to the next. So it really was a defining wake-up call for me in terms of how precious life is. Again, I only have one life. It cannot be repeated. And it changed my perspective, I think, and what my definition of success looked like. And some of the key reflections I had was, Helen, you need to manage your stress better, much better. My body was telling me that. I needed a lot more flexibility in my schedule, so I needed to earn my time and my schedule by decreasing my workload and really sort of take control of my life again, to be the CEO of my own life, as opposed to being, um, beholden to a company. And I needed to use my natural talents and my skills and my experience better for the good. So my calling, I've discovered, was really a gift to be received. And I think it comes from listening. So before I told myself what I wanted to do, I needed to listen what life wants to do with me. And I really heard that voice very loud and clear. It wasn't the small, quiet voice anymore. And it really culminated in the right timing and opportunity for me to change. So I decided to reskill and to sort of build on all my skills and experience that I had with organizational development and become an executive coach and run my own practice. Um, of course, I was incredibly fearful. I had a lot of doubts that came up. Would I make a success of it? Where would my client base come from? How long, how would I rebrand my identity? And how long could I really do this for? But today, I'm still coaching. I have a good and a healthy practice, and seeing my clients thrive and be happier and make positive changes in their own lives really gives me that meaning moment, which is this is why I do what I do. And I've also come to understand that my calling is not a goal to be achieved. So, I was very goal orientated, had to achieve certain things, but it was actually a gift for me to honestly and authentically receive. It was almost the treasure of being very true to myself. And it wasn't a voice out there anymore. It was something that came from inside. It was a voice in here calling me to really be the person that I really believe that God wanted me to be. So, in summary, there were 6 things that really influenced my calling. And that was my nurturing, my parents, and my grounding. Words spoken over my life, paying attention to those words. Suffering through my illnesses and, you know, my values, my skills, and my talents, really thinking about that and being clear about that, identifying it, reflecting, having time to reflect, which my illness certainly gave me, and opportunity. And so those things really culminated in where I am today. But what was really important for me when I started my practice was to be able to sustain it, knowing myself as I know myself. And so, how did I actually respond to my calling? And what are some of the things that I'm doing today to really nurture it? One of the things that really comes to mind is to have a clear mind's eye vision. And I would pray a lot about what my future looked like. And I would ask God to almost reveal that to me. And I believe that God gives us a glimpse of our calling because He certainly gave it to me. I could see myself in the future coaching and helping others. I could see my servant heart in practice. And so that really came to bear for me on my life. And 2 Corinthians 5 something that was strong for me. We walk by faith, not by sight. And so I had to really lean into my faith and trust that. And Frankel had a beautiful mind's eye vision. You'll recall that he had a vision of himself in the future, talking about the psychology of the prison camps, to this full, well-lit auditorium, and they were sitting in upholstered chairs. He could see the detail of that vision, and he captured his mind's eye vision so beautifully. And I really believe that that is a really strong thing. It does happen. You do see yourself in the future. I often ask my own clients to close their eyes and to think about themselves in the future. What could that future look like for them? The second thing was to protect my energy and my time. And because I have a tendency to please, to want to help people, I decided that I wouldn't have more than 8 clients a week. And I've been pretty good at sticking to this, um, to not overwhelm myself, but to also be able to show up in the way that I want to for my clients. Taking very good time for myself. So having lots of breaks. So my husband loves to travel. So fortunately, that's great. So sort of working life around that, making time for my family is so, so important to me. I have aging parents and really want to spend time with them. My friends are so important to me, and exercise to just, unwind and work it all out of the system. No work on Fridays. I know a lot of people are quite gobsmacked by that one because how do you do that sometimes? But I've really tried to make that a key principle for me, if possible, to not do that because it means, yes, I can go away for the long weekend and I can also catch up on admin, reports, and notes that I need to do as well. So that's worked well for me. Close my laptop after 5. I'm really trying hard to do this because I know that it's necessary for me to protect my energy. Not always possible, but it's something that I strive for. Choosing clients and work that inspires me. Um, I know that not always I can be very selective, but most times I'm able to really gravitate towards those clients and the work that's incredibly rewarding. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And the third thing is connections and associations in your network, and COP stands for communities of practice. So, of course, I'm very linked into many communities of practice, and I think that this is where supervision and accountability are really, really important. So I attend regular supervision, and I network with like-minded coaches in the industry, which keeps you relevant. It keeps myself grounded and it keeps myself connected into what's happening in the country around coaching, and of course, opportunities to learn. So I do see myself as a lifelong learner. Um, and I've obviously had the beautiful gift of being able to do the basic training in logotherapy, um, It's new knowledge, it's new skills. I'm always, looking for ways to enhance what I already know. And that's one way of nurturing my calling. Um, but life happens, of course. Things happen, and sometimes you lose people. And I think it's about staying relentless in your pursuit. When you have that joyful conviction in your heart that this is the work that you're supposed to be doing, and you can see positive change in others, it allows you to stay grounded and to stay the course. And I think the last thing is being brave and courageous. So sometimes you've got to do some of the work that I don't want to do, and maybe they're not ideal clients, but just saying, yes, this is great. It's souls, it's people that hopefully I can add value to, um, and bring something good into their life. Something that's a verse, John 10, verse 10. I actually have this on my board in my office. It's such a powerful verse that helps me to stay relentless, helps me to stay grounded. And the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. And I think that's the responsibility that we have. We've been given this beautiful life to live, and we should really live it to the full as best we can under the most humble circumstances. We all have something that we can give to the world, that is uniquely us. And as a closing reflection, and my trainer, my beautiful trainer, Coral, is here tonight. She knows this. This is something I've held so close to my heart for so long. Ralph Waldo Emerson. So, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And this for me is so powerful because, especially with the work that we do, because it's the belief that you go into with your clients, that the human spirit is able to rise above and achieve remarkable and meaningful things despite the circumstances in our life. And we always have the free will to choose our destiny. So, my wish for you tonight, and for those who perhaps watch this recording later, that they rise up with courage and, bring that same um, conviction of their heart that their clients will be all that they are meant to be on this earth. Because the world needs us and needs you in all your beautiful uniqueness. Because in the end, I really believe that the true gift that we have to give to others is the gift of ourselves. And that's my story tonight. Thanks for listening. Open to questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Helen. Yeah, and to go back to what we were talking about yesterday and your fear that your story was maybe too small. I think we come to logotherapy, our first encounter with it is always through Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, usually, and we go, here is somebody who found meaning in the most unbelievably dire circumstances of suffering. I think we then tend to want to think, and obviously a lot of talks that we hear in forums like this and platforms like this are people who have survived great suffering, great loss, great huge challenges of all different kinds. But I think what is so beautiful and meaningful about the story that you've shared with us tonight is how somebody who, I suppose in some sense, and many of us here tonight are in that boat we come from, in terms of even our own country, very kind of privileged positions and things, and that, maybe we don't have we suffered enough to find meaning? And
Mm.
what you pointed to so clearly is that um, yes, it is about suffering. Of course, Frankl says that suffering can be meaningful as long as it's unavoidable. Um, but that we need to be awake to the meaning of the moment all the time. And I think this is what, you pinpointed all those turning points or milestones in your life with such beauty and clarity. I can almost feel the moment where you went corporate. It's about achievement and growing and becoming, but it's almost like you felt the loss of the human element. And I'm sure that you still, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you still work with a lot of people who are in corporate environment
Mm.
when you're coaching
Yeah.
with them. So you're still actually in that world, but what you've
Yeah.
done is add that human element to it, that, as you say, the giving of oneself, the gift of yourself to other human beings. So it's in such a beautiful way you've managed to marry what is, I think can often be a very soulless and difficult environment, the corporate world. You found a way to keep that in your life, but in a way that is meaningful to you, and as you say, aligns with your values of who you are. The things that were instilled with you through your lovely family and all those things. So I, I think your story is really wonderful because it's kind of a really shining example of how we can continually look at our lives in terms of what we are being called to do, what we are being challenged to do, what we are being guided to doing. So thank you. I'm really sorry that more people aren't here tonight because I think this is a very important presentation. And Pan, I'd really like us to urge everybody to watch the recording. There's one question I have for you, um, which I found it was a very interesting choice of words. You said quite early on in the presentation, you create your calling.
Mm.
And that's not something I've really heard before. We are called to do something, something external draws us. We
Mm.
find meaning, we discover meaning. And so I'm just
Mm.
not quite sure what you meant. I think I've sort of got it, but it's just eluding me slightly. What you
Yes.
mean by that? How do we, or is it a part of what one does in terms of
Mm.
finding a calling? If you could just
Mm.
expand a little bit on that, please.
Um, Thank you, Mark, so much for that summary and for the question. Creating your calling for me was about really taking cognizance of the feedback that I'd got from people, the relationships that I had at the time, my experience of corporate. So it was almost a way of me building it or building a new future. Creating something different for me. Perhaps I should have worded it more sort of like your calling is something that you build into or something that you develop over time. Um, through the culmination of experiences and relationships. And I guess, what I'd heard people say to me, and of course, my love of coaching. So, that was an experience that helped to create what my future ended up looking like.
Right. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously we're talking semantics here, create, find, discover. But what
Right.
I'm getting now is that so the question that clients often ask is, so who is calling me? What is calling me? Particularly with
Mm.
people who perhaps aren't religious or don't
Mm.
have, any particular spiritual beliefs. So what is this? And you get that, what is this calling? Who, what? Because it implies something in the external. And I suddenly had the thought now while you were talking that maybe who is calling us? In your instance, obviously very much it's God. But then if you think about the words that your parents said to you, they are part of the voice of that calling because they
Mm.
are calling you
Mm.
into yourself.
Mm.
So in the end, you could almost say, well, if somebody asked you, so who called you? Who drew you towards the discovering your calling? It would be, well, God and then through my parents and my experiences. So it's yeah, I understand it completely now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Anybody else?
Hi,
Coral.
Helen. Yeah.
Michael.
Hi, nice to see you again. Helen, I was very interested in your year 2017,
Mm.
and you explained how facing mortality actually gave you a lot of clarity, and time in hospital gave you time to reflect. Um, my sense of you, though, and the privilege I've had of working with you. Um, Firstly, tells me that you would have got there anyway without that suffering and that terrible experience. But I'd be very curious to know, and I've thought about this a lot, that how would you advise or how would you work with a client who hasn't had that facing mortality experience?
Mm, mm,
You know, we often say, oh, yeah, think about what you'd write on your gravestone and how would you feel if you had 1 year to live.
mm,
But not everyone uh, has had that experience.
mm.
So in your coaching world and going forward, as you will one day be, I'm sure, a logotherapist, how would you bridge that gap?
Mm. I think it's really an unraveling process. Thank you, Coral. Lovely to see you too.
Yeah.
It's an unraveling process in terms of why is that person coming to coaching in the
Mm,
first place? So, what is the need or the draw? And often if it's part of an executive program and the business is paying for them to do something, um, it's about defining what it is that they need in their life. And often it's that sense of lack of joy, lack of
mm,
focus. There's symptoms that come up, disconnection, um, just really not feeling that the work that they're doing has the impact that they want it to, or people around them are not experiencing them in the way that they want them to. And so I really explore and look at their values and their beliefs. What's important to them is the congruence between that and the work that they're currently doing, and really understanding, well, is there something different that you want to do? So that's more of a conversation and an exploring process. And sometimes clients come and they are very obvious about the fact that they don't feel that they have meaning and joy in the work that they do. And then we can immediately start exploring, well, what is it that
mm,
is going to make a difference? And, what feedback have you had?
mm,
How's your past prepared you for that? So a lot of those questions that I almost raised up front about the things that I thought about, I would then explore those with my client. Um, because even though you haven't gone through a tremendous life-changing experience like Frankel did, I think that there's still those moments of discontent and disconnection and incongruence where we can find and explore what's causing that, so that you can be more fulfilled in the work that you're doing and have a greater impact on those around you. And so sometimes it's incremental, right? It's not about sort of this massive big transformation or big change. It's maybe something different that needs to shift and change. And that can be something quite small sometimes. Yeah.
which obviously leads to bigger things.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Helen, you're going to be such a marvelous logotherapist.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you for the encouragement.
You're already doing logotherapy with your practicing logotherapy with your clients. So what you're talking about now in logotherapeutic terms, we're talking about activating their will to meaning.
Right.
Um, and we all have that. We all have a latent will to meaning in us. And as you so rightly say, it does not take a major life-changing experience to activate that will. And I think in your case, I think you were somebody who always had that strong will to meaning through the kind of values that were instilled in you and how you chose to live your life as a very young person. And it became activated through, as you say, incrementally through a series of small events, suddenly realizing that you were not fulfilled by the corporate world, and then falling a little sick, which gave you some time to evaluate. And slowly, 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 that latent will, that intrinsic will to meaning was developed and developed some more and developed some more until today you actually live your whole life is built around your will to meaning. And I think that that's very much what certain types of coaching do, but that's obviously at the core of logotherapy, and you understand that so beautifully from your own experience in conjunction with the work that you're already doing. So yeah, Cole's absolutely right. You're all going to be a wonderful logotherapist.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Accept that humbly. I've got a lot more work to do.
Mm.
I'm about to register for the advanced course now, which is quite daunting, but I'm looking forward to it.
But may I ask why you find it so daunting? You're used to working with people, you do it every
No,
day of your life,
no,
so
no.
it was so
I,
daunting.
I don't think so much it's the content or the support because I know I'm going to get incredible support and great trainers. It's more about fitting it all in. So that's more about what it is. And again, managing my time and my energy. So it's just one of those things that I'm going to enjoy, but have to
This is
manage.
something else that you do also in the last section of your talk when you were describing, you are keeping yourself in that wonderful, what Viktor Frankl calls our state of healthy tension, between that which is not achieved and that which is yet to achieve. And how do we keep ourselves motivated and moving forward? And that is always leaving something unachieved, and I think that's the striving for and never quite reaching the goal, but that, we can never reach pure perfection, but that doesn't mean you stop striving for it. I think that's a principle that you see to carry through very much in your personal and your working life.
Thank you. It's very useful.
The one other thing, I had another question for you. We have quite a few students who come to us from coaching backgrounds, and
Okay.
do you see that logotherapy is something you can integrate into your coaching, or is it something that you would practice separately, or would you create something new out of the various branches of the work? I mean, this is the thing, that the legacy that Frankl has left to us is to take logotherapy and apply it in all kinds of ways in our lives and the things we do with our
Mm,
lives.
mm.
Um, we're interested to see whether you see this as something you would practice or do something separate, or whether you would incorporate it into your existing
Yeah.
existing.
It's a good question, Mark, and I've actually wondered about it myself because I think that a lot of the coaching that coaches naturally do is around purpose and meaning and around something bigger than themselves, something that transcends themselves, something that's going to give back to the world in a more powerful way. And my so why was I drawn to logotherapy as a coach? I think was because it resonated with me personally, and because that's the kind of work that I love doing. Is it's one thing making somebody more effective at work, but if they can find joy and fulfillment and their impact is so much better, that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in. So I would say, in my very humble sort of logotherapy freshman opinion, that you can incorporate it really, really well, because you are doing this work anyway. And the concepts and the words are different. Sure, I've learned a whole new different vocabulary. And you've just taught me something else now about living in intention and leaving things unfinished. And thank you for that. So, there's beautiful descriptions and ways of seeing things that enriches my practice. And that's what drew me to it is how can I be more enriching? What else could I bring? What else am I missing? How could this person go to a different level? And I really believe that's where the power of logotherapy is. And it's obviously not a silver bullet for everything, but it has tremendous power in the moment when we're talking about someone's meaning and, impact on the world.
And what you're talking about here is working spiritually with your clients. I think there's a
Mm,
kind of perception that coaching is very grounded in the psychological and physical world. Logotherapy,
mm,
we go into the noetic realm. But you clearly have a very spiritual dimension to the work that you do with your clients, which is again,
mm,
I think, that I think why you're drawn to logotherapy and why you are going to be so good at it is that you understand, just so that it's so much beyond that we have to move into the transcendent and to look at what is happening in, as Frankl says, that area. What is the spirituality? It's the bits of
mm,
us that make us human.
mm,
Um, feels, I can tell from how you're talking that your coaching already involves a great deal of that kind of work and goes beyond just merely kind of practical, physical choices and suggestions and exercises and things like
mm.
that. You see your clients holistically.
I think so. Yes. Thank you, Mark.
Anyone else? One more question. When you encountered, as you say, some new terms that you've learned, so let's something you came across something like the Socratic dialogue. Would that be something that is very new to you, or do you find that you use something like that or very similar in your current work?
Sorry, Mark, could you repeat the question,
So
if you don't mind?
the form of communication we use in logotherapy is based in the Socratic dialogue.
Right.
Um, and so I'm just interested to know in your work, do you make use of those kinds of techniques, or is it a more kind of prescriptive way of working with a client?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean by Socratic dialogue, and maybe
Okay,
that's
so
just because I'm a beginner.
Okay, so basically, Socratic dialogue is where you question the client in a way that invokes their own uh, questioning and stuff. So you draw the answers out of them through the way you question them. In other words, so
Oh,
you're not
yes,
providing answers,
yes.
guiding them towards through questioning, finding their own answers.
Yes, absolutely. And of course that's core to the coaching of the training of a coach
Okay.
is to ask very powerful open-ended questions, questions that evoke deep thinking, and to not ask close-ended questions, which could just give you sort of a yes and no answer and don't progress the client forward. So absolutely, I mean, I do that all the time. It's part of our core training is to ask questions that really open up different avenues of discussion. But it may also be using yourself as an instrument as a coach. It may be an observation that you have observed in your client that you really just bring to the fore and see how they respond to that. For example, one of your clients may be talking about something that has really weighed them down for some time, and the observation of the coach is, I can see that that weighs very heavily on you. And this has been hard for you to carry. And then to wait and to see. So there's different ways, I think, in which we can evoke emotion, feeling, um, and I'm looking forward to learning more about that from a logotherapy perspective as well, Mark.
Of course, the wonderful but also quite scary thing about logotherapy is that there are so few kind of rules in a way, it's Elizabeth Lucas says it's the most improvisational of all forms of therapy. And so the learning to trust oneself in the moment, and of course that deep listening and listening to on so many levels, what the client is saying, what they're not saying, the vocabulary they use, the tone of
Mm.
voice, all those kind of things to
Yes.
and be in that moment constantly. So I don't know, something I found really scary in the beginning of, because you're not going in with a nice little handbook of what you must do. And because we view every single client as such a unique individual and every encounter as completely unique, um, you're starting from a clean slate every time. And even now, after a few years, I still always have that slight adrenaline thing, before a session
Yeah.
starts, because you don't know what you're going to do and are you going to be able to be in the moment and respond to what your client is needing
Mm.
in that
Mm.
moment.
Mm.
Um, but it's also so it's a little daunting, but it's also the really exciting part of it.
Yes, and I mean, I've been reflecting quite a lot lately, to your point, Mark, around the power of observation. And I think as logotherapists, that's a very key skill as well, to really, really hone in and observe your client. And as you said, listen for what's not being said. So, level three listening. What am I sensing? What am I observing in how they are today versus how they were 2 weeks ago when we connected? What has shifted? What's changed? And I often find that surfacing those things and bringing those up really provides opportunity for growth for clients because that observation is so important. And so I think that's probably why I try and manage the amount of clients I have because it's a very intense focus and it's challenging work, I think, when you bring yourself in that way towards your clients, where you are really observing them, noticing, you're really focusing on the words that they're using, and maybe repetitive words that they're using, the pattern of things. And so all of that, is data. It gives you data and information that you could use to help your clients.
Of course, the thing we're really doing in logotherapeutic encounter is constantly looking for the logo hint, which the client may
Right.
not even be aware of themselves. What
Yeah.
points to their meaning, to their will to meaning. But this is wonderful. And I think that, I hope you will, and I'm sure you will go all the way to the professional, but I think there is a huge potential here for some very exciting developmental work in terms of what you do and with logotherapy. And so that's going to be great. Thank you so much.
Mark, before we end off, can I just say one more thing?
Mm.
We've talked about methods of coaching and Socratic dialogue and looking for logo hints and all that. But at the end of the day, Helen, I have to say to you that if you did none of that, your passion would connect to the person that you're connecting with, and that in and of itself is invaluable. I think it's that energy that you exude is worth a fortune. It really is.
Thank you very, very much. Greatly appreciate that. And thanks for everyone for making the time.
Thanks so
Thanks for
much.
the
Really
opportunity to
lovely
share.
presentation. We'll make sure that everyone gets to see it. And yeah,
Great.
uh, thank
Thank you.
you. Thanks, Robert, for hosting as always. And thanks to everyone who's here. And we'll see you soon.
Hey,
Great.
When is our next one, Pan? I can't. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just sort of trying to think. I think it's
And
two.
so organized, she'll have the
23rd.
answer. There we go.
And it's you, Robert.
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
23rd.
Thanks so
Yes.
much, everyone. Have a lovely evening. I'll see you
Thank
in
you,
the
everybody.
morning.
Thank
Go
you.
well.
Thanks, Helen. That
Blessings.
was
Thank you,
lovely.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.